Whoa.
We did it.
Hello.
How are you doing, Alexis Kennedy?
Wonderfully, Anders.
Good pronunciation.
Thank you.
I'm going to make sure that the audio volumes here are not as strange as they are currently. For example, I'm going to get rid of that so that there isn't too much background noise. Hopefully you guys on Twitch chat can hear us properly. If you can't, I'm going to turn a few of my knobs, and hopefully this is going to be even better. First of all, Alexis, I had very much hoped that I wouldn't be sitting here, but you'd be talking to Martin. But unfortunately, he got sick, and when it comes to streaming, I am Discount Martin.
Right. Well, no disrespect to you, but I was looking forward to meeting Martin, but another time.
It would have been great to hear you guys talk. Hopefully, we can make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But we're in London. You're in London. It felt like if he's able to make it over here, it would be great to talk.
And
to
I'm mere minutes away. I'm south of the river. This is so we're just north of the river now, aren't we? Anyway, but yes,
I think so.
I'm just a hop across the river.
Not to talk too much about London, but I spent normally when I go to London, I spend a lot of time on the tube. Mm-hmm. This visit, I've been going around in taxis and Ubers, and I have no idea where I am.
It's basically warp travel.
Yes. What I wanted to start this conversation from is Stellaris, because, of course, you worked on the Horizon Signal update that came out together with the Kennedy update.
Which is the most flattering thing anybody has ever done for me. Banks, Kennedy, Asimov. I mean, Jesus.
And at the point where I didn't have time to talk to you, because I wanted to hear a bit about your thought process, because Stellaris 4X, you can do with it, of course, within the parameters of the game, but you can tell pretty much any story. And I wanted to know what your approach to that type of like open book situation is. Like, where do you, if you can do pretty much anything you want, where do you go?
So I think I'm pretty well known in the industry for a particular aesthetic and a particular approach. Most of the stuff I do tends to be in one way or another dark. It's usually got something to do with death. It's generally gothic in some sense, and nobody showed any inclination to push me away from that. So I just threw essentially a gothic deep space ghost story at the guys, and they said, yeah, that sounds cool. So I went for it. And my writing over the years, a lot of people have called it Lovecraftian, which I don't really think it is, because I'm quite optimistic, and he was such a savage old cynic. But obviously, I do write about nameless monstrosities or monstrosities with unusual names and things in the dark, and the eruption into the firelight of sinister presences from outside time. So I can see there's kind of a family resemblance there. And this is a lot more explicitly Lovecraftian than I think anything else I've ever done. I wanted a monstrosity from outside space that had been worshipped over thousands of years, that transcended time, and that wasn't necessarily malign. I mean, I don't want to spoil the ending of Horizon Signal.
No, I was going to say there might be some spoilers here.
I'll minimise the spoilers, but if you can, the entity in Horizon Signal, the worm in waiting, you can cooperate with it, you can collaborate with it, and you can make close and special friends with it. And whether that's a good conclusion or not is very much down to the player's interpretation.
So, just speaking of Horizon Signals, after it was released, it's been out for a while, and some people have experiences. I know when me and Martin was playing Utopia previously in the last few weeks, his horrible empire that no one should actually enjoy because it's crap and it's not the right type of starfish. They encountered the worm. But I wanted to hear about what has the reception been from your end? What have you heard?
I've been very gratified. So one of the design intentions with Horizon Signal was that it would be the narrative equivalent of a special piece of sausage in the soup. So if you think about a stew, you generally got the sort of the liquid base, and you've got all kinds of things suspended in it. And Stellaris is the liquid base. You've got the mechanics. You know, you could, the game could have zero content in the narrative sense, and you could still play and enjoy it as a 4X game. But it's got all these bits you encounter. And I thought either I can do something that's very spread out that adds sort of a little bit of extra savouring to the soup, or I can do something, and I only had a few weeks to work on it, that is a contained chunk of content. And if I'm doing that, then it should only show up every so often. So I talked to the guys about how to implement this, and I think it's got like a 2% drop chance whenever you encounter a black hole or something like that. So you can easily play through a game without coming across it. But what was the original question? I'm completely. You came across Horizon Signal.
Yes, the reception from the players.
Yeah, so people have.
Oh, okay. We seem to be very low on frames, so I'm going to try and restart the camera, which is not something we want, and then I'm going to let you answer it.
I'm not frozen on the camera. This is actually how I am. I don't move.
Yes, it's unfortunate. The camera has, unfortunately, when you're at events, sometimes when things go, it's been on for a while, so hopefully it will last cinematic FPS. Yeah, so hopefully the camera is not horrible. We'll see if it adds up. Otherwise, consider this the podcast equivalent of Twitch. Luckily, I was going to say, maybe we don't have to show too much gameplay right now. Actually, the gameplay should be fine. It's just the camera itself. And say the Horizon Signal is overlaying the signal. That might be the case. Technical difficulties aside, I don't think, yes, we are.
Are we good?
Well, we're not. We're about as good as we can be. I guess people will have to close their eyes and just listen to our sweet voices, and then I will internally.
So it's radio play time.
Yes,
okay.
Internally it's kind of hard to tell, but internally I'm fuming.
Right.
But I
wondered what the smoke was coming out of your hair. I thought maybe somebody left a cigarette in there.
No, cool comment collected. It's not a problem.
Anyway, reception then.
Yes.
Yeah, people seem to like it. I have seen a lot of forum threads where people have got to the end, and the reaction has been along the lines of "Sweet, holy fuck, what just happened?" So I think it's worth playing through to the end. And I have been delighted to see fan fiction emerging. I really enjoyed a piece I saw on Reddit where somebody had found the incident in Horizon Signal where an earlier version of your race that reverses your traits can show up, and you could end up deliberately or accidentally engineering your race back towards this sort of dark mirror version of itself. And this guy had written a fanfic about a sort of Xin-like warrior race that were horrified to find that their ancestors in this previous iteration had been peaceable, intellectual species, and they regarded this sort of peaceable intellectual cult as a terrifying corruption which needed to be stamped out. And ultimately, in the fic he'd written the peaceable intellectual cult overcame the aggressive primary species. But I think that's a really good example of seeing somebody take a basic structure that I put into the story and use it to have a completely different experience, which is, of course, a hallmark of Stellaris games. So it's very much been that. It's people taking the story I built, and once they've got over the initial what the sweet fuck just happened, interpreting it in a very wide variety of different ways.
Because I guess that's also one of the other things to take into account when you're building this type of story, where you're making a special sausage for the soup, as it were. That everyone playing it, I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a fanatical purifiers maybe. You're probably going to react differently, but your story is not the only thing affecting the player's overall story. And that must mean that kind of like, even if you get exactly the same story beats, you don't necessarily have the same experience.
Yes.
Based on what the worm actually does.
Yeah, so this is one of the reasons that I wanted to work with you guys, is because my background on 4 London and Sun and Sea very much is little nuggets of story that can be experienced in a variety of orders. So you want each nugget to gleam, and you also need to make sure that they can be arranged in a variety of patterns that will allow them to look like a constellation rather than like somebody just thrown up. And I think if you've got there's a lot of assumptions about the way one nugget of story relates to another. It's not an overall map. You know, one tends to induce others, and others tend to occur in the presence of other bits of story. Even, you know, something as simple as early, mid, late game. But when you have to write every snippet knowing that it could occur anything between seconds and hours after the last relevant snippet, it really forces you to be disciplined about what you're writing. And it forces you not to take the player's attention too much for granted, because they might well be busy panicking about the fact they've got a problem with diversion ethos over in a relevant border world, or that their economy is tanking. So they're not necessarily going to devote all their attention to your lovingly written choice description.
Yeah, because and I guess this is one of the. We've talked about the special sausage, and I think this is interesting for a lot of people, because of course we do have a lot of mods out there for Stellaris. Some of them are more gameplay focused, mechanic focused, and there are some that are more like content story driven. How do you, to use an academic term, how do you write hypertext in a way where you don't go insane trying to keep up with how everything's connected?
So I think the answer is, it's not actually hypertext, precisely because of what we were talking about a few minutes ago. So if you're writing, and this is, again, one of the design intentions with my original work in back at Valbetta, if you're writing hypertext, it's either finished or it's broken.
Yeah.
It's either complete or there's something wrong with it. Because if it's pure branching narrative, every branch has to go somewhere meaningful. And also, you know, which is a separate problem, branching goes like this.
Yes.
So what games like Stellaris do that have you know, there are chains. One nugget has to occur after another, and there tend to be a sort of, you know, immediate branching. If you make a choice, outcomes happen. But things peter out and then feed back via the game mechanics into everything else that happens. So if you complete a story and it gives you a chunk of research, or it destroys all the population on one of your planets, then that's not a hypertext connection. That's an effect on the simulation. But that effect on the simulation can then drive other stories. It can drive them directly, because actually there's something scripted to trigger when your population drops. It can drive them less directly, because, for example, you take a rebellion story much more seriously if your population is dropping there, because you really need those last few pops. Or it can drive them very indirectly, in that it just changes the way that you think about other stories. So it's you know, it's back to the stew. It's a stew, not a pie. If you you know, if you bake a pie and then start chopping it up and moving it around, what you will end up with is a mess. If you take a stew and end up chopping it around and moving it around, then what you're doing is stirring the stew, which is fine. You know, it leads to tastier stew and brings the sausage to the surface.
I'm very hungry, and I'm wondering if it has anything to do with that.
Yeah, I think really I've talked myself into famine here. Sorry about that.
Well, it was more. I was thinking more like we finally have proper food planets in Utopia, in that you can eat other species now. Which is very dangerous and shouldn't be done, because people tend to get very mad at you, as I've experienced previously. It's not something people enjoy.
You know, late game Stellaris, you end up with a lot of pops who really aren't pulling their weight.
Yeah, that's true.
And they're complaining. They are developing diversion ethics. They are showing way too much sympathy for those fucking avians over the border. Yeah. And what you need to do is salt them, you know, possibly pickle them.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've realized with Utopia. And I think you're partly responsible for this as well, because a lot of the PDS grand strategy games, specifically Crusader Kings 2, has this idea that you can say really horrible things But since it's in gameplay terms, it's like, yeah, this makes sense. I understand why you killed your sister and married your other half-sister to the King of France. Because of course you would. And then you assassinate both of them so you can get claims of their lands. And when Stellaris launched, perhaps it didn't have too much of that. But both with partly Horizon Signal because weird shit happens, but also with Utopia, they're slowly but surely build to a narrative where pretty much every empire has the option of being total dicks to everyone else, and it's fine because that's what you were supposed to do. Yes, I'm a fanatical purifier. I'm just going to wipe everyone out of the whole galaxy.
And I think more than that, a lot of interactive narratives are a sort of moral laboratory for players' emotional responses or moral responses to things happening. And very often, if it's just a scripted interactive narrative, there's a setup where you know what's going to happen. It looks like an episode of a TV show where you can see the people moving the pieces into place for the moral decision. And you can get very powerful, effective stories like that. But once you've seen a dozen of them, you start to understand how the wheels move. When you've got a simulation that drives stories, then the background situation, again, influences the way you see the story. So when if you read a story about slavery, then the author's opinions are likely to be fairly clear. And it may be, if it's a well-written story, it may cause opinion to diverge, but it's always going to be the same. If you find yourself making a decision about whether to repurpose people as condiments when your empire is in a dreadful state or a perfect state, or most interestingly, somewhere in between. But, if you just take one, is that really, these things happen, but once you've just eaten one, people are moreish, right? And that's the thing. So encouraging people to make decisions that under other circumstances they might not have made. Because one of the things that interactive stories do really well, and I think it's not a bad shorthand for the whole point of strategy games, is to make different decisions in different circumstances. So the narrative feeds back into that side of it. The
thing I can't really like is the small. This feels weird because I'm saying it and I'm kind of I'm working on the game from a marketing perspective. So every time I say something, I really like this bit, I have to acknowledge that I'm in part at least paid to say some of these things. But I never lie, I do like Stellaris quite a lot. That was a rant, and as in Sweden, as we say, a brasklapp, meaning I now have an excuse if someone calls me out on it. But more importantly, I like the small story beats where you're like, if I'm playing a pretty horrific empire or someone that maybe I'll eat another species because someone has to and I'm hungry. If I send that, since we switched to global food, means that you can actually trade food now with other empires. And that means that as soon as I send food to another empire and they accept it in a trade deal, morally, they are no better than me. And while it doesn't actually affect any gameplay terms, really, honestly, it's just a value for food. But once you do it to a friend who is playing like a more righteous empire, that mechanic changes because people tend to get super pissed about just one piece of food. And you're like, rather than just insulting them, you're like, you know what? I'll help you. I'll send some food your way. You can have this. I realize that you're hungry. You're not full up. Have some food. And people kind of have to, make a choice that has no, there's no gameplay moral involved. It's just gameplay mechanic specific. Of course, there is one for how you want to role play the species. But other than that, it's just food. But if they know that it's another species, they might make the wrong choice. And making the wrong choice for something that's just like a game mechanic, I find really interesting.
There's I used to, and I guess still do, call these reflective choices. Choices you make in the game that have no concrete effect on the game mechanics, but do affect your perception of them. So they do affect the way you react to them. So they affect your experience of it. The most important thing that happens in a game is the thing that happens between the player's ears. It's not the thing that happens in the CPU or in the hard drive. those things cause this stuff to happen, and they're essential. And obviously, if you say to somebody, "Okay, here's a blank text file, write your own game," then you're probably not going to be able to charge 30 quid for it. But when you get a game that people care enough about because enough of the rest of it is rich, and enough of the rest of it sets up these presumptive relationships, then that's a really exciting affair. I think my favourite bit of writing, which I didn't do in Stellaris, is just the response you get, I think, from a pacifist race when you declare war on them when they're not expecting it.
Yeah.
And it just goes, you just get communication going, but why? And there you go. You got the whole history of the relationship of the two species in 2 words and an ellipsis.
Let's see. I'm gonna see if we have any questions from stream before I just spurge out about how much I love Stellaris. So if you have any questions for Alexis, put them in Twitch chat. In the meantime, we have some people being really sad and some people being really happy. I wanted, and I realized this is a hard question to answer, probably, because if you like your work, since Horizon Signal has so many story beats, do you have? I guess I realize it's hard to play favorites if there's a larger works. Are there any small story beats that as soon if you're playing the game and they pop up and you're like, oh yeah, I really like this bit, compared to know, everything? Spoilers, by the way.
Are we talking about Horizon Signal or about Stellaris generally? Sorry.
Let's go with both. Let's go with Horizon Signal first, unless you have an anscer for Stellaris in general.
The two things. So the general thing I was going to say, it's I can't remember the name of the species, but there's a bunch of troublesome gas giant natives.
Yes.
Who just want a little bit of help, and they're like the neighbour downstairs who keeps borrowing another cup of sugar and another cup of sugar, and they actually can they borrow your lawnmower? And okay, they haven't returned your power drill, but they really need the lawnmower. It's just like that, and having people prevailing upon you and raising the ante like that is tremendous fun. It's been the most enjoyed. I think the thing in Horizon Signal that I like most, apart from the absolutely bonkers ending, is the so spoilers. The segment where you encounter a battle cruiser in a system where you communicate with it and find it's one of your own admirals on board it, looking scarred and weary on the sort of smoke-filled bridge of this thing, and he says, "Can you please just destroy me?" And if you ask him why, he's it'll be worse to me if you don't, I promise you. And meanwhile, it turns out that the admiral that you're talking to is halfway across your empire on a ship in perfectly fine condition, and you can decide. I think whether to destroy him as he requests, or whether just to turn around to leave him alone, because obviously the whole thing is screwed, or whether to take the battlecruiser off him and repurpose it. And that came out of me trying to do something very personal and immediate with a limited set of mechanics in Stellaris, because it's a big game, but it's a 4X game. It's not a CRPG. You're not generally interacting with the individuals.
No.
But I wanted an individual's story there. I had to talk to Max, the scripter I worked with, about ways to get the names of individual leaders to do it, and deciding whether or not to destroy a single ship suddenly becomes a significant consequence, and it feeds back into a mystery. And I like it as well because really I think all those 3 options are reasonable ones. It's quite hard to find a narrative choice where all 3 options sound sane, and just destroy this admiral who's begging for death and is presumably some sort of alien trap.
It's very annoying.
Yeah.
When it pops up, and you're like, damn it. We had a really straightforward question earlier that's gone past. What's your favorite FTL type in Stellaris?
It's what are they called?
You got hyperlanes, you got warp
hyperlanes.
drives.
Yeah, okay.
Everyone loves hyperlanes.
Hyperlanes, yeah, because it's just it makes the map easier to.
Yeah, I prefer them too, because you can see the map, and you also have where the choke points are, or the fact that there are choke points, which kind of adds a bit of tension to at least when you're building your fortresses.
And it means you get more interesting situations in the later game, I think, because you end up having to do this round another empire.
You can end up in the situations where you're like, why is your territory in the one hyperlane connected point to the rest of the galaxy? I don't want to declare war on you, but I need to go through. And sometimes when people or when empires are mean and close to borders, you're kind of screwed. We have some more questions that are like, any chance Alexis can write some supernatural events for Crusader Kings 2?
I'd love to, if you guys want me to.
I was going to say, it seems like I'll take that back to Stockholm.
Yeah,
and be
please
like,
do.
To the CK2
No,
team.
I really enjoyed working on it, and I'm going to be free from August. I've got a project of my own I'm working on, but I can take chunks of working around that, so I'd love to.
Well, it's a shame you told us on stream, because now someone's going to call you up and be like, I heard you were free in August before I get back. Let's see.
But Monks and Mystics has just come out, hasn't it?
It has, and it's been, I think it's been, for the most part, well received. There's been some people that don't like the supernatural stuff, which I can totally understand. It's, once again, going back to
Marmite, isn't it?
I mean, it's one of those cases like, what type of game do you want?
Yeah.
And the fact that we can, and I'm sorry, I'm going to blag on about how great CK2 is now instead, but the fact that CK2 is at a point where you can actually decide on, okay, this is the type of game I want to play, and the game can service that is super fun, and hopefully we can get that with Stellaris as well. I think we're on our way. Let's see, and then we have some questions I don't think you can answer, because they're more like the Martin type of questions, like energy weapons and stuff. Let's see. More story packs. Well, we haven't revealed anything yet, but apparently you're free in August, so we'll see about that. Just from your perspective, the last thing you did for us was, of course, Horizon Signal. That came out late last year. What have you been doing since you did Horizon Signal?
I'm working for BioWare.
Okay.
I'm allowed to say now it's the Dragon Age franchise. Obviously, I can't talk much about it, and I shouldn't talk much about it on your stream.
Well, it's one of those cases in game dev where you have fans and they ask very pointed questions. And you're like, I really want to talk more about this, but we really can't. But in this case, you can talk a bit about it, because I'm also interested.
I can. Also, what I will say, which is a fairly general sort of thing, I sold my stake in Fail Better last year because I wanted to do less company managing and more writing and designing. And I wanted to work for a bunch of companies who I liked and respected, so I could see a variety of approaches to this sort of thing. And you guys in BioWare are both great, but you're both very, very different in your approach to story. So that's been exactly what I wanted, and getting my head in you know what? I'm not even trying to come up with an analogy for the difference between Paradox and BioWare, because I'll get myself into so much trouble. But that's been lots of fun. That's going on until August. Then I'm back working on a game I released in alpha earlier in the year called Cultist Simulator, which is pretty much the kind of game you probably expect me to have written. Narrative-driven and horrible. I've been doing a couple of other bits I can't talk about because it's the games industry.
I know the feeling. Last but not least, we've been talking for about half an hour. Before we go, I would like, because let's get back to Stellaris. What's your favorite type of empire or species to play? What do you like out of the ones you've experienced with? Is there one that you're coming back to when you play the game?
So it's generally I forget the precise terms now, of course. It's science directorates.
Yes. Well, so they've all been changed now.
Oh, really? Okay.
They will be on Thursday, because empire creation is different. It's a lot easier, at least for me, to wrap my head around, because you have more choices, and Martin has added a bunch of civics and stuff, and it's all. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to having more people that be like that you can talk about it and I've actually played it. Because otherwise, it's like the only person I talk to is the same guy you talk to, Max.
Right.
Because I talk to him quite a lot. And the rest of the team, of course. But back to science.
Yeah. So I like autocratic, enlightened, cerebral societies that get ahead in research. And I generally play either humans or fungi, because the humans, it's a role-playing thing, and it's nice building up a society around them with a bunch of names that make sense in terms of my own cultural experience. And fungi are just cool.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that I find so interesting because, and this is my experience, but on the people on the Stellaris dev team that I talked to recently, like all of them really like the cuties pack. So you're for the most part going to see them play with the cuties, which is like the gecko and the butterfly and all of that.
Yeah.
But we do know that most people like to play with the humans. But of course, most of the dev team and me included are like, the humans? That's boring. But it's one of those cases I find really interesting that when you're finally put in a position that you can go to the stars, and of course, since we talked about there's so many story beats, a lot of people do pick the humans. Luckily, now that there are like 5 different humanoids rather than just one.
It was one of the hardest things when I was writing Horizon Signal was trying to find a balance between. I was basically diversity, but across a dozen different species types. So I'm writing your scientists having their hands, and I'm thinking, is the first species actually going to have hands?
Yeah.
Is it going to have manipulators or pseudopods and I spend a lot of time sort of finding safe phrases, that your scientists have in their grasp. And you can see on your admiral's face that, again, do they have faces? Do they have expressions? Is it a thing? So you determine from your admiral's manner, and that it's very challenging to good writing, because what you want generally in writing is a lot of show not tell. You want a lot of specific stuff. It's much more interesting to say, his eyebrows rose so far they almost disappeared, than it is to say he looked very surprised.
Yeah.
And then I spent a lot of time until I was going through and taking out those details and trying to find ones that would apply equally to an avian or a crustacean species.
I could keep talking, but I feel like I'm just gonna ask the same questions and fangirl a bit more. So I think we are gonna cut it short here today. Alexis, thank you so much for coming by. Thank you for being just south of the river, so it was easy for you to come here.
My pleasure. So I did it specially for you guys.
Thank you. Thank you guys at home for watching. It's been great. This is the final stream here from us, Paradox at EGX Rezzed, which means I can, finally make sentence with words coming out of my mouth. Possibly. I mean, I realize now that I am totally drained. It's been great fun. We've had 3 days. If you missed any of it, it's going to be on YouTube later. So once again, Alexis, thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone.